whiteboard, which will be a regular vlogcast, I believe is the correct terminology. Approaching the whiteboard may well be a working title. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. But obviously very privileged to have for the first ever one, Caroline Spalding, Director of English and Associate Senior Leader at Tupton Hall School. Very big presence on Twitter, sort of edgy Twitter. Can we say that? Is that too geeky? Massive influence in the sort of the English kind of sphere of that. And, you know, amazing person for sharing resources and digging people out with those resources when those slightly unplanned moments happen. And career is going to be the topic we're talking to Caroline about, and that's something you've blogged about, and your excellent blog on identity and career.com is obviously going to be a good start point for some of this. Have I missed anything out? Oh, at Head of English on Twitter and misscdspalding.blogspots for the blog. Anything there that I missed? Does that cover everything? Perfect. Okay, so we're talking about career. So why don't we start off with some of your previous roles? We've spoken about your current role there, Director of English. And
yeah, absolutely. So initially I took on a TLR for teaching and learning in my first post. That was 3 years in. It was quite a broad role, got involved in some whole school literacy, some raising achievement at Key Stage 4, but then really moved to my current school, looking for more responsibility. I'm lucky enough to work in a huge secondary comprehensive, dying breed of local authority schools. We've got 1,700 students on roll, and my first post there was as Key Stage 3 coordinator, so a bit daunting, looking at the curriculum and assessment model for nearly 900 of our students, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. What then happened was a bit more unorthodox. Unfortunately, unexpectedly, our head of faculty ended up on long-term sick. And it meant that myself and another fairly inexperienced colleague ended up sharing the leadership of the faculty for a period of time. I then became acting head of English on my own, and within a year I was appointed to the role permanently. That was about 5 years ago. This September, as you've mentioned, my job role obviously has changed quite significantly, and we've got a new head of English. I've become a Director of English, which is kind of strategic overview, quality assurance, data and reporting, all the good stuff, as well as leading on Stage 3. And then added to that, I've become Associate Senior Leader, so looking at assessment across the whole school, assessment with our levels primarily, but also moderation, standardisation, and our use of SIMS.
Okay, so you kind of sound like you were sort of thrown in at the deep end. Was there always an intention to kind of climb the ladder, or was that it happened and then you rolled with it? Or
oh no, absolutely. I think I've always been fairly driven. I was really lucky in that I've been sort of surrounded by teachers in my own family. So my granddad, my grandma, my dad were all actually head teachers, and my mum's been an assistant head. And I think really they've been incredibly positive role models. They all liked their jobs, which I think is really important if you're going to sort of want to climb the ladder yourself. I'll never forget the day my dad retired. He actually got a helicopter. The kids and the staff paid for a helicopter for him to get the impressive lift home. And for me, like seeing the impact that he'd had, I know it sounds a bit trite, but on the students there, but also the whole community, I think, it's kind of a life well lived. That was my first blog actually, writing about when my dad retired, and it made such a massive impression on me. I think that kind of impact you don't find with many jobs. It's perhaps an underused word, that I do think teaching has a sense of vocation. It's something, as I say, that I want for myself at some point, I think.
Perfect. So, I mean, obviously you've spoken there about the positives, and you're obviously massively positive about your dad's experience and your own. But English teachers tend not to go up the ladder. There seems to be a little bit of a pattern there. What do you think is the kind of the inhibiting thing? Is it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that for many it's a sense of fear. I mean, in any kind of leadership role, there's clearly comes with responsibility and a sense of accountability. The book stops with you, and in a core subject like English, that sense is perhaps more acute than in other subjects, perhaps. So I think that can stop people. Also, I think there is a tendency to not want to see their own abilities, and perhaps people underestimate themselves, perhaps particularly women. I'd suggest, I describe myself as an ardent feminist, and I really passionately believe that we need more women in senior leadership positions in school. Something that hopefully I'll go on to kind of do something to address. But yeah, I think, I don't know, we're quite denigrating as a bunch. Perhaps it isn't a gender issue, but that ability to put yourself forward and talk about your own experiences can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think, that there is obviously that disproportionate number of teachers who, female teachers to male teachers, and then who end up in senior leadership roles. There is a sort of disparity there that doesn't quite add up at the moment. And I mean, that is an interesting thing, but you're right, maybe it isn't necessarily a gender thing, maybe it's an acute thing. I think, this week I had to do an appraisal thing, and I had this class who got amazing results, but on every single bit of it, I was trying to find an excuse. Oh, there must be someone else. The form tutor gave them all this knowledge. This person, that person, anyone but myself. So maybe there's a factor there. I don't know if that's an English teacher thing or an English thing, but there's something there, certainly. So, the workload of English, the marking, is that a factor as well, or is it just that sort of pressure on us as a body?
No, I think that's, the workload absolutely, I think, is a factor. It's hard to compare to different subjects because I've only ever taught English, but I do think English teachers are sometimes disadvantaged. I'm thinking from personal experience, moving from middle leadership to senior leadership, I've found that actually it's quite hard to show positive impact on student outcomes. We're a requires improvement school. We've been disappointed with the exam results. We haven't seen that beautiful trend of improvement, as we'd like to see, perhaps because of the size of cohorts, but also the constant change and pressures that we've had as a subject area over the last few years. Can be really hard. And perhaps some people feel like actually stepping into a leadership position will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. From personal experience, my extremely talented deputy head of faculty resigned her teaching TLR this year. I totally understand the reasons for that. She's written an absolutely superb blog about it. It's Miss S. Fry on Twitter if you want to check it out. For her, it took away from the joy of teaching. I also feel like schools are increasingly trying to keep English leaders and core subject leaders in middle leadership positions, perhaps because of the difficulties of recruiting. Often, sorry, my cat has just decided she wants to come for a call.
Why not? Why not?
I know. I'm just going to put her down here. Yeah, not at all a stereotype. No children, but 2 cats. Anyway, coming back to this then. As I was saying, that I think a lot of schools have moved sort of head of English posts and head of maths posts onto the leadership spine. So it can be difficult to break out of your subject area because, they're so keen to kind of keep experienced staff in those positions.
Yeah, and of course, once you get a quality head of English, it's gold dust, isn't it? I think to a lot of people, they really want to cling on to that because the results are so dependent on English and maths. What do you think are the qualities of a really good head of department, then? What makes a great head of department of English? Well, any subject but English.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you start going on kind of courses like MPQML, leading from middle, MPQSL even, you hear an awful lot about leadership versus management, and the idea that we should spend more of our time actually leading, taking leading decisions than simply spinning the plates and doing the management side of the job. But I kind of argue that it's not that simple, and that actually you've kind of got to get the management, the day-to-day running of your faculty in under wraps before you can kind of move on. So getting in place those clear structures, being able to organise yourself and your time, I think are absolutely essential. People take the mick slightly out of me that I have a hatred of paper, but there's a reason for that. It makes my life an awful lot easier when I've got things organised in folders. Whether it's my email or my documents, anal retentive about the way that I label my files even, because actually it makes it so much easier to find things when you're looking for them. Or the other day it was my rag-rated post-it notes to try and organise all the jobs that I've got to do and try and actually prioritise them. So I think that's a fundamental, really. But then obviously when you do start to look at the idea of leadership, it's a word that I'm sure as English teachers we cringe at a little bit, but the idea of a vision. So by that I simply mean actually articulating the why you're changing something or you want something to happen, not just what you want people to do. I think it's that can really bring people on side. So the ability to communicate that, I think, is absolutely essential. Also, it's the way you communicate with your staff, and you start to understand the people within your team and kind of what makes them tick. Now, I lead a team of 16 within the English faculty. You very quickly learn that actually some people are best to grab by email, some people are best in person, but also the day-to-day relationships that you build with people, I think, is built on excellent communication skills. I think you've also got to be quite analytical, so actually reflecting what are the particular issues, and being brave as well to seek out excellent practice from elsewhere when things aren't working, or think imaginatively about solutions. We're all under various degrees of constraints, whether it's budget or time, and sometimes you have to think about things a different way, in order to achieve what you want. I think, speaking personally, one of the things I found most challenging as a leader has been holding others to account, having difficult conversations. You can't, this is not a job, I think any leadership role you can't do successfully on your own, or there's very, very few. And actually it's how you work through others. So that can be really challenging. Not taking things personally is something that I've definitely learned over the last 5 years. It can be quite hard to detach yourself, particularly when you've actually perhaps not been in a position of leadership previously, and been working kind of peer-to-peer with people. And then the final thing, which I hope I have, is an ability to kind of be positive, even when the game gets really tough and it's February and you're not in your house in sort of daylight hours. You need to be people's radiator, I think, as a leader. Shout loudly about small wins. It's one of the reasons I'm constantly tweeting students' work on Twitter. Our school, as I said, requires improvement. It can be a fairly tough place to be under scrutiny, and I think it's really important that we shout about what our schools do well, and what our students do well, and same with our teachers, because we've got incredibly talented teachers in often what's quite a difficult environment. So
yeah, and I know that there are voices of dissent about the whole tweeting students' work as though it's somehow wrong, but I think you're absolutely right. We do such an amazing job, and it can often you can go weeks and weeks without praise, and then one little moment can really change that, or one little success for the particular student that you've been working, in a slightly different way with, and I think that is important to celebrate that. I just want, go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I'll be honest, I've tweeted work for students. I think it's how you do it and clearly what you're signaling. I'd never, try and tweet work to criticise the student, but I've had some absolutely amazing contact with parents who've seen their work on Twitter. I've had kids constantly say to me, "Oh, miss, was that my work you tweeted?" But it's only ever been positive. And as I say, perhaps if the context of our school was different, it might feel like bragging, but I constantly feel like, as I say, local authority comprehensives, but also schools that require improvement. We're always in the press for bad reasons, whether it's kind of in other educational circles or literally in the mainstream media. So why shouldn't we celebrate it? Why shouldn't we shout about it? I'm at the DFE on Tuesday because I'm part of the teacher reference group, and sometimes it very much makes me wonder, do people who sit down in London actually know what my school's like and the reality of it? Do they just see GCSE outcomes? Because I've just been marking work now about Ovid and Christina Rossetti, and I don't think they understand actually what goes on in our classrooms sometimes. Anyway, rant over.
Yeah, no, and we've got to be very careful there. Two Northerners moaning about London, we've got to be really careful. The one thing I did pick on there as well was about you talked about that word vision, and obviously you're right to say it's a sort of dangerous word in the way it conjures perhaps images of Premier League managers talking about philosophy. But I do think that's really important, that idea that you've got a core thing to return to, that almost every decision can relate back to. I think that's a really interesting point. I'll probably come back to that in a bit, actually. One thing that I picked up from what you were saying as well is about leading a group of very talented teachers. Do you think, therefore, there's a sort of pressure to be the best teacher of the group, or is it's more about your leadership ability?
Don't get me wrong, I think in schools everything has to continue to come back to our core business of teaching and learning. It's why we're in it. Absolutely. And I would be devastated to think that actually somebody felt my own professional practice wasn't up to scratch. It's the thing that keeps me in the job, you know, the fact that I love teaching. However, there's a danger that we also can start to think that we're somehow the finished article. You know, every teacher can improve their practice, whether you've been teaching for a year or 20 years. I firmly believe that. I think you've got to, you know, walk the talk in the sense of exposing your classroom to people, you know, encouraging people in, inviting people in. I'm at the moment doing a bit of sort of shared planning with one of the teachers in my faculty, which really came out of a conversation over a cup of coffee. And I know that simply she's improved what's going on in my classroom this week. As I said, because we've supported one another. It doesn't matter that I'm the director of English and she's an English teacher. It makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. Yeah, you know, a sense of professionalism, pride in your own practice by all means, but keeping in mind that, as I said, there's no hierarchy when it comes to classroom teachers. We're all, when it's you and 30 students in your class, kind of you're all in the same boat.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's just interesting because I kind of, obviously it goes with the territory that the head of department would most commonly also be one of the more experienced teachers. And so as someone who's not been promoted to one of those types of roles, like, you're often looking at them thinking, oh my God, it must be when you get to that point of being that amazing a teacher, then the career bit follows. But actually what you're saying there is, that isn't the case. It's not like you reach level 42, you're in.
No, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, how just given a slightly different subject, I'm teaching A-level English language for the first time from this September. It's something I've kind of always wanted to do because I've taught English literature at A-level, taught media studies at A-level, and it's always kind of been a little bit conscious of never taught English language. But honestly, that's floored me. I've been right back to NQT. I've been absolutely reliant on the teacher that leads Key Stage 5, kind of her resources, her advice, you know, how she'd approach teaching for certain topics. So, you know, there's a huge danger, I think, as I said, in perceiving yourself as any kind of expert. We're all learning. You know, true growth mindset for you.
So kind of segueing a little bit, but, you know, thinking about that journey then, so what would be your advice for someone starting out, teacher of English, just in post, looking to move forward on that journey, you wanting to climb that ladder, you know, we'll presume for the right reasons. Why not?
Absolutely. I mean, me and my friend at work have got a firm belief that actually you do the job before you get paid for it. That's certainly always been kind of borne out in my own career. You know, volunteer for things, get involved, whether it's a whole school teaching and learning group, whether it's, you know, working with a particular cohort of students. You know, don't presume that you have to have the job title to just do something that you're passionate about or enthusiastic about. I know it's really difficult when we're all under so much pressure, but whether it's a lunchtime club, it's about building your experiences and your CV, and actually you'll find that very quickly people recognise that, and, you know, maybe the job title will follow. I'd also really had very positive experiences of completing my leading from the middle, my MPQSL, and, you know, seek out the person who leads CPD in your school and ask whether they'd support you in one of those courses, because it's sometimes less about the content of the courses, but actually just meeting people in a similar position to yourself, and having time and space to kind of reflect on your own leadership qualities and perhaps what you need to develop and work on. I know in particular my own MPQSL project, you know, shone a light on perhaps some things I'm not so good at. It was quite challenging, and over that year I genuinely think I sort of grew as a leader. So yeah, absolutely pursue that type of CPD, and then perhaps you won't be so surprised to hear me say that I think connecting with other leaders on Twitter is absolutely essential. You don't have to be SLT to observe SLT's chat on a Sunday night. You know, you don't have to participate. You can be a sort of fly on the wall, but that's hugely improved my own professional practice. And being able to contact the likes of Jill Berry and Chris Hildry, you know, just to ask advice or see how they'd approach things is just, honestly, it's been invaluable for me. Those two people in particular, I have to say, have been just, well, secondary kind of mentors and encouragement. And I don't think I would be in the position I was if it wasn't for those types of people sort of supporting me and being your own kind of personal cheerleaders.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a great source. I mean, we're probably preaching to the choir here, but it is such a great source of, you know, a higher, different level of thinking and, you know, just different angles of things. And I think there's an openness to it. I see, I don't know if you'd agree, but I see the black and white trial debates slowly sort of dissipates, and I feel like it's becoming a format of real, genuine openness to almost like, I want you to prove me wrong, which is, I think, is fantastic. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in any kind of walks in life, you always get the one or two people who want to spoil it for the rest of us. But yeah, generally, I think Twitter is a hugely supportive and professional place. And if you do come across, one particular bad apple, don't let that put you off. Continue working with the people who are positive. I mean, Team English, woo. They are the most amazing bunch of people. And as I say, hugely had an impact on me, not just as a leader, but also like our resources, our curriculum, the way that we assess in our faculty, I think is better as a result of knowing those people.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to go back to something you said as well there about sort of being in role before you're in role. I was talking to a colleague this morning, and she was saying that she's just started at a new school. She's very keen to go up that ladder, and she's got a real vision for what she wants to do. So she said, from day one, I'm going to be assistant head in the corridor. And she's not an assistant head, but her logic was, well, if I'm an assistant head in the corridor now, when I'm just a teacher of English, eventually, when I am an assistant head, like that journey will almost take itself. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, doing things that are beyond outperforming your pay almost, without getting too businesslike about this. And so for that person at the other end of the spectrum, just starting out, obviously you've taken this journey we're in September when we're recording this. Advice for sort of the new heads of department taking on that incredibly challenging role?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned before kind of the managerial side of things, and just get in place those things that are going to support your own organisation as quickly as possible. Honestly, they do save you sanity. Data tracking as well. If you're going to show your impact in role, having those processes for collecting information on students, I think, is absolutely essential. For me, a really important other thing was getting a mentor in school who wasn't my line manager. My line manager is the head teacher. They don't always want to be asking him questions, which perhaps you might think are a little bit stupid. So I approached the head of PE basically and asked if he would sort of work with me. And his support was invaluable. As I say, just being able to ask those questions, perhaps I wouldn't have been so comfortable asking the head teacher. Perhaps another one as well is make sure that you ask for feedback on how well you're doing, and then really listen to it as well when you get it, which can be really challenging, and it's sometimes hard to not take things personally. I mean, I remember one of my superb teachers decided she was going to apply for another job. It was mid-year of my first year in post, and for some reason that seemed like a slight on my leadership, that she would abandon this amazing department that we were building together. But of course it's not. I mean, people are under various different pressures and pulls and pushes, and actually it was nothing about me, it was nothing about the school. She's actually, I should mention, a superb head of faculty at another school now, so clearly it was the right decision for her to leave. And then the last one really is protect yourself. Work-life balance is an incredibly challenging thing, I think, in schools, particularly when you're in a core subject, and even more so when you're in a leadership position within those core subjects. My rule is I don't work on a Saturday. I do tweet on Saturdays, I admit that, but I don't mark, I don't plan lessons, I don't do a million and one other things that I could be doing. And whatever works for you, just make sure that golden time is protected. And equally, if your family are telling you that you're working too much, listen to them. The job is fantastic, and the job is a huge part of my life, but it's not everything. And actually, if it wasn't here, I'd still have my family and I'd still have my friends. So it's important to kind of hold on to that, I think, and hold on to who you are as well outside of school.
And you spoke earlier about that idea of vision, and I suppose one thing that I would wonder is, if someone is to come into a place now where that has a very different vision to their own, would you be sort of advising to that person, go in, separate it all out, get rid of all of that, and just drive at your vision, or is it a slower process?
I think with that, I mean, our own whole school vision is aspire, learn, achieve, and that's perhaps one of the reasons I bought into my own school so much, because actually I think those three words kind of somewhat why I also see as the core business of schools. But within that, in our English department, we've kind of tried to articulate what that means in English. And that wasn't a top down, I didn't turn up one day and go, this is what Aspire, Learn, Achieve means. That was a collective process. So the 16 teachers in the English faculty, you know, we worded that statement together. So I think it's important that you bring people on board, whatever it is you're doing, whether it is that strong sense of identity, that's a collective identity. It's not about me, it's not my faculty, it's our faculty. I think that's an important shift. But, you know, whenever you're trying to change anything or create a new vision, yeah, it's making sure that actually it's shaped to the community in which you're working, whether it's the faculty or, you know, the community in which your school actually sits. It's got to be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'd kind of think would be the right thing, you know, just from a total novice point of view. It's just interesting there, you know, you picked on the fact that when you're a head of a department, you might have led in a classroom, but it's a very different type of leading. You're leading a group of talented, intelligent professionals who will be able to create that positive dissonance. You know, it reminded me a little bit of that book, The Team of Rivals, the idea that get the best people in, even if they're actually disagreeing with you and making life a little bit more difficult now. You know, that positive dissonance is actually useful. Yeah, I think that's an important point to have picked up.
I must say that, you know, I've experienced the opposite end of this as well. You know, the absolute ideal is where you've got actually people who are interested and engaged and they want to have these conversations. I have to say, as the head of faculty, I've also been in a position where people perhaps haven't been so engaged in the issues. Yeah, and, you know, the ideal is to have a team like that, but it's not always, particularly in the current recruitment, how do we say, I wouldn't use the word crisis, but perhaps that's hyperbolic, but certainly the challenges of actually getting people in post, not least, you know, people of high quality, can be a challenge in itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's that is a good point to pick up on. And you know, my head of department, who tweets at I think it's at Tennis Bloomfield, said that if her and the second in the department have a meeting, and at the end of that meeting they conclude and come to an answer too quickly, they almost run the meeting again, because there needs to be some friction there. There needs to be, well, you know, that kind of, even if it's only on a small point. And I kind of like that idea. I get that idea. I know. Yeah. Does the crisis, does that affect it? I don't know. Yeah, I could see the concern there. So thank you, Caroline, for this. I think there's lots of really good advice in there. I certainly feel inspired. I obviously, like a lot of people, find just being a teacher of English, you know, it takes up such a significant amount of time. It is incredibly challenging, and that ladder does look daunting sometimes. But actually, you've made it sound like something really positive to pursue if that is your interest. I think that's fantastic. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we missed that we said we were going to kind of discuss.
No, we did have our slightly rude one of the poo filter, which we were talking about earlier. I do like this idea. Basically, we were talking, weren't we, about the idea of a poo umbrella, and our leaders, is that their job to kind of deflect some of the downward pressures to your team? And then we were discussing the fact that Jill Berry, wonderful woman that she is, had the idea, no, you're not an umbrella, you're a poo filter, and that actually there needs to be a shared sense sometimes of what the challenges are. So it's not about completely protecting people, but sometimes actually about having a shared sense of what needs to be achieved and bringing people on side that way. So that was the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, no, I do remember that, and that is quite an important point, the poo umbrella. And yeah, I do think, you know, it is nice to kind of have that, some of the stress is removed, but your point there about actually you can't have it all removed. You do have to be aware of what's going on, and you do have to know what challenges there are ahead. Otherwise, what's the point of being a team, a department? So I suppose that concludes our chat today. Thank you very much for helping us all out and sharing with us your amazing Brighton Rock deck chair. Is that a deck chair in the background?
Oh, these are from my wedding.
That's
it is.
Oh, that is a piece of art. That is beautiful. So no, thank you. And hopefully that's inspired more leaders from English to chase that dream.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, all good. Sorry. It's the cat.
What a great end on.